Greetings and salutations, everyone, and welcome back to tonight's second half. Before we jump into it, a couple links. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon and PayPal are in the description below. The merch is displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They all were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, the links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It doesn't cost you a cent. Click that like button. It takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads I put out daily, click that bell icon. And folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all these things, they really do help this channel to continue to grow and go. And they definitely do matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump into tonight's second half, shall we? Today's first subscriber submission. Hey Jeff, I have not talked about this for quite some time. But first, I live less than a half a mile away from the lady who was killed here in Durango, Colorado. And I've lived in the Four Corners for most of my life. There's a supernatural element to the place. It's cursed. The ancient ones built multiple ancient cities all over this area, like Chaco Canyon's massive complex in Mesa Verde. As a kid, my parents bought some property on Ruins Road. It's close to the Aztec ruins. It's another Anasazi complex that these ancient ones just mysteriously disappeared in the past. My parents got 2 acres east of the ruins and moved us in when I was about 15 years old. It's a beautiful piece of land right next to the river, but the place gives me an uneasy feeling even after all of these years. When we got settled in, I made some friends with most of the neighborhood kids. There were 2 girls that lived west of me, and I didn't have a problem sneaking out at night to see Laura. She was the same age as me, and we both had a bit of a crush. So, me being the one who would head out at night to sneak into her room, it was no problem for me to walk down Ruins Road at night. After a couple of weeks of this, I had one of the most terrifying experiences in my life. It was about midnight, and Laura had to go with her parents in the morning, so I was going to head home so she could get some rest. I started on back trail to the ruins, and I heard something moving throughout the cedar trees. I stopped to look around me to try to see what was making the noise. When I stopped, the noise stopped, but every time I would start walking, I would hear something coming up behind me. So I hastily made my way to the road. For some reason, I figured I would get away from whatever was following me once I made it to the road. It was a very dark night, but the moon was out, and when the clouds would clear, the night would lighten up so I could see behind me. But whenever the clouds would cover, it was so dark you couldn't see anything. I kept hearing the noise, and I kept up the pace. The fear was overwhelming, a deep sense of fear, almost like I was going to die. I started to hear this tapping of whatever was behind me on the asphalt, like nails hitting the road. That's when I thought my heart was going to come out of my chest. I stopped to turn around. I could see it now with no trees to cover it in the open road. It was huge, dark, and terrifying. It was at least 7.5 feet tall. Its eyes were glowing red. The silhouette was hulking broad shoulders, just massive. It was probably 20 yards away from me, but as I saw it, it might have been closer. I turned to run as hard as I could, but it was right behind me, moving up to me. I ran till my chest was on fire from breathing so hard and my legs were about to give out. I didn't know what I could do to defend myself against such a creature. I just stopped falling on my knees in the middle of the road, crying and shaking uncontrollably. I said out loud, "Father in heaven, protect me from this monster." As I kept praying for salvation, a calm came over me, filling my body with a sense of peace. The clouds cleared up, and the moonlight was even brighter than before. I got up and faced the creature behind me. I said loudly so it could hear me and my prayer. I watched it turn away and head to the cedar trees on the roadside. I was still scared out of my mind, but I felt better about continuing home. I hustled to keep my eye on my back. I never would walk on that road at night, or would ever again. I let Laura know what happened to me. She said that her family had lots of experiences of weird things happening in the ruins. At that point, I had never heard of skinwalkers, but that's what she was telling me it was. I don't believe it was. It was something that could have ended me, but by the grace of God, it didn't. Today's second subscriber, Colorado Dogman submission. Hey Jeff, I've been a subscriber for your channel for about 4 or 5 months and I enjoy the information you share on here. This encounter occurred in Colorado Springs near Peterson Air Force Base many years ago. At the time, we lived in Fountain, Colorado, just south of Fort Carson Army Base. Early one evening, I was driving my daughter to the northern part of Colorado Springs so she could attend her acting and modeling class. While driving on Mark Chaffel Road, near the Air Force Base, we came to a cluster of trees and brush and noticed the back of an extremely large animal. My daughter said, "Daddy, look at that bear." I told her that it was far too large to be a bear. As we got closer to this animal, we saw how wide it was at its shoulders and its head was bent over like it was eating or trying to hide. The fur was blackish in color with a bit of silver. My daughter and I looked at each other and then looked back at the animal again, and it was gone. We had no idea what we saw. The hair on the back of my neck was standing up. Well, that's my encounter. On another note, my cousin, who lives near Eagle, Colorado, stated to me that he had a Dogman encounter as well. Today's third Dogman, Colorado subscriber submission. Hey Jeff, the area of Bennett where I grew up in was 12 miles south of town. I grew up on a 75-acre ranch with horses, dogs, pigs, cats, and we did have a few cows, but not many. The last bull we had got mutilated back in 1998. I had noticed he was gone in the morning and went out to feed. He was there that night before, but gone in the morning, so I went to the barn to tell my dad that he was gone, and we all went looking for him. I found him down by the creek just lying there, but I noticed that he was missing portions of his face. So I went and got my dad. We went back to where he was, and my dad cut him open, only to find that his intestines were gone. There was a laser mark going down from his anus to his testicles. His testicles were gone, his tongue was gone, as were his ear and his eyes. The skin around his nose was also gone. There was no blood or smell either. Anyway, I grew up not even a mile from an abandoned missile silo, and there were several abandoned ruins of prison camps in the area as well. Or that's what I was told they were. However, the property that my dad owned and the properties around the area used to be owned by the Buckley Air Force Base and Lowry Air Force Base as well. We used to find unexploded bombs all over the place from practice drops. I used to ride horses all over that area and actually was riding one day on the neighbor's property, and the next day the military was there in the same spot. I had stopped to rest my horse the day before, blowing up bombs. So my entire childhood there, I was always outside in the field with my horses. If I wasn't riding, I was sleeping in the creek with them. On several nights, I know that I wasn't just sleeping with my horses. There was something else there. I used to see large black dogs in the field that would run with the coyotes, but when I was outside at all, they were up on the ridge watching me. We used to have horses that would get injured on absolutely nothing, but none of them were killed, just injured. Our chickens used to get killed all the time, but we chalked it up to coyotes. Now, however, knowing what I do know, and knowing that there are dogmen out there, I am not sure if they were just killed by coyotes. Every house I ever lived in has always been haunted or had some sort of paranormal surrounding to it. I'm not afraid of anything thanks to these things that I went through as a kid. The house I grew up in, for the most part, everyone hated to walk on the south side of the house at night except me. The south side is the side that the silos were on. Everyone said it felt like we were being watched and that the hair on the back of our necks would stand up. They hated to walk on the south side of the house if the lights in the barn were left on after dark. They all made me do it. There were times that I would bring a fresh ton of hay onto the property and wake up at around 2, maybe 4, to flip the floodlights on and see the hay had been thrown all over the place and my bales were broken open. That happened twice a month for 6 months until I saw a ghost in my house and told him to tell whatever was outside to leave the hay alone. Then it stopped. The way my dad was able to buy the house was the people that had the property before him came home one night to find that their camper and their property had been demolished and part of the foundation to the house that wasn't built yet had been destroyed. They put the property on the market and my dad bought it within a week that it was on the market. My dad said that they just up and left. They took was just their belongings. Dad started to rebuild as soon as the property was in his name. He said that nothing strange happened when he was building the house. Back in the summer of 2003, my parents took my niece and nephew on a cruise and asked me and my husband, my son, if we would watch their house and tend to the horses. So, of course, I jumped at the opportunity to get away from my mother-in-law for a few weeks, and my son was 2 at the time. My husband had gone up to Black Hawk to gamble on Saturday night, so my son and I were home alone. I had gone out to feed around 8 p.m. and then went back to the house. A couple hours later, I heard my horses, I had 6 at the time, all running to the top of the pasture where I fed. I thought this was odd, so I turned the floodlights on to see if I could figure out what was going on. All I saw was my horses all looking toward the creek. Their butts were facing the house. I thought, that's odd, really odd for my horses, so I grabbed a shotgun off the china hutch, my truck keys, and moved my truck to where the headlights were facing the field. I didn't see anything at first, so I climbed through the fence and started to walk to the creek. My son was safe in the house sleeping. When I got about 100 yards from the fence, my horses surrounded me, not letting me go any further than where I was. I tried to push them away from me, but my retired rodeo mare put her head in my chest, and then one of my other horses put her head in my back, essentially pinning me in place. My retired rodeo mare got down on her knees, and the other horse pushed me onto her. I was facing the creek at this point. I heard a growl and movement in the creek, so I fired a shot. I heard the shot hit something solid, and then another growl. Then my horses took me to the fence. When my husband got home, I told him what had happened. He said that in daylight we'll go check it out. The next day, I put my son in his kangaroo pouch, and we all went out for a walk. When we got to the creek bed, there's a lone aspen tree there. We saw a tuft of gray and black fur with a purple hue to it. Then, when I looked at the ground, there was what looked like blue droplets that led up the bank and into the field. We followed the trail of blue stuff to the fence that separated our property to the silos. I climbed through the fence and looked for more, but it stopped at our fence. After that, nothing happened until a couple years later. I was on my way back from picking up some horses that I had taken down to Kiowa to get bread. I stopped at the stop sign to give my truck and horses a rest because the road I took was horribly maintained, and I really beat the heck out of my truck. While I was stopped and sitting there in my truck, my whole truck and trailer, which is a 4-horse front-load stock trailer, started to move violently back and forth. I looked in the side mirror on the passenger side. I didn't see anything. But when I looked in the driver's side mirror, I saw this thing with the head of a dog standing on 2 legs, trying to get into my stock trailer to my horses. I slammed my truck into gear and got out of there. The thing was trying to foul me. It jumped the fence into the field and ran after me a little ways, but then redirected and ran into the creek. When I got to my friend's house, she asked me what was wrong. I told her what had happened. She didn't believe me until we started to examine the horse trailer and saw that there were claw marks down the side of it and around the gate lock where it tried to open the gate, but it couldn't. About a year after that happened, my husband was coming home from gambling at around 4 in the morning. We lived in Hudson at the time. He was getting off the highway and looked down in the ditch and saw what he said were werewolves walking on 2 legs through the ditch towards the meat locker. He hauled home and didn't tell me about it for a week. We moved from Hudson in 2007 to our house in Prospect Valley, Colorado. There were times at night that I would hear knocks on the house and see things through the windows of the house. At the time, we didn't have any guns because of our young son. We had knocking on the house a lot. When we heard it, I'd leave my husband in the house with our son, and I would take a knife to go check the property. I never did see anything. Fast forward to the last couple of years, my nephew lives in Bennett in Kiowa Creek. He has told me that he sees things walking on 2 legs in the creek that have the face of a dog. He has been stalked in the creek and even ran off the creek. One night when we were down there at around 2 in the morning, I was with my current boyfriend. I've been divorced for 4 years now, and a friend. The creek is haunted and has a rich history of ghosts and Native Americans as well. We were walking next to the creek on the trail when we heard something running at us. I saw red eyes. We stopped and we were silent. I looked around and came face to face with the red eyes and a horrible smell. It smelled like wet dog and stagnant pond water. I looked at the eyes for what seemed like forever, and then they vanished. I have no idea what it was and still have no clue. My nephew and my son were being typical boys one night, and instead of using the bathroom, they decided to pee off the front porch. They heard walking on the roof of the house and look up to see red eyes and growling right back at them. Needless to say, they went right back in the house. My nephew has seen something in one of the water pits by the creek feeding on deer carcasses. He refuses to go down to the creek alone. Second email from this subscriber. Jeff, I forgot to tell you about the buffalo ranch north of Byers, Colorado. I adopted one of the kids that grew up working on the ranch, and he told me some strange stories about different things that happened to him there. And when I was there with him last summer, we had a weird experience. He told me that at least once a week, if not daily, he would find dead buffalo randomly throughout the property. The way they dispose of them is just to toss the dead in a pile down by the creek, the Bijou Creek. He said that his family had no idea why they died, but they lost a lot of them. He has seen them torn to pieces and then just dead and not bloated. The family doesn't bother to send them to find out what caused the death. They just pile them up and move on. They have several piles of dead buffalo all over the creek bed. He also told me that one day he was walking through the creek bed after it had dried up for the summer, and he heard the buffalo start to stampede, so he turned to see what the problem was. He saw 2 large black dogs chasing them. Then, when the dogs saw him, they stopped and started to walk casually down the creek bed. Then when things he thought were dogs got a little ways away from him, they stood up on their hind legs and started creeping down the tree line as if they were going to go after him. Then they disappeared. He said he ran back to the farmhouse and refused to go back down there until I asked him to take me there once. We got down to the creek bed, taking the truck load of sand for my house, when we both at the same time got a feeling that we were being watched. So we stopped and started looking around. We saw a man standing by a pile of dead trees 50 yards away from us. I started to take steps towards the man, and we both saw him clearly. He was wearing a red flannel shirt, blue jean overalls, and he was looking right at us, and we were standing side by side. When I stepped towards him, he vanished into thin air. We got the chills, and I decided to walk through the trees toward the north. He was yelling at me to stop walking and get into the truck because when that man is seen the werewolves are near. I told him that's okay. I just want to walk. We had no weapons at all. We were grabbing our shovels. I took my phone out and started to take pictures of every few feet. When I heard branches snapped, I took a picture. The hair on the back of my neck was standing on end, and the afternoon out was dead quiet. There were no birds, insects, nothing. You could hear a pin drop a mile away. It was so quiet. We walked about a mile from the truck and tractor. Decided to turn around and go back. On our way back, I stopped to rest and talk to nature. All I said was that whatever or whoever is out here, we mean you no harm. And we are just here taking a walk because the day is beautiful, and so is the creek. After I said that, we heard walking not far behind us, but we couldn't see anything. It sounded like whatever it was walking was about 100 yards east of us. I said out loud, "We do not wish to cause you any harm in any way. We are just enjoying the beauty of nature and would like to get to our vehicle safely, so please allow us to do so." We started to walk back to the trucks. I heard a noise not far from me because my adopted kid took off running. When I heard the branches and dead leaves crunch, I stopped and took some pictures all around. Then I walked casually to my truck and said, "Thank you for allowing us to walk the beautiful land. We are going to leave now." Then he got onto the tractor and I got into my truck and we left. Today's fourth Colorado subscriber submission. Hey Jeff, I went to southern Colorado to pick up some hay with several friends yesterday. The hay is good quality and more affordable than buying it at a feed store where they'll charge you an arm and a leg. The catch is you have to pick it off the field yourself. I can't pick up those heavy hay bales, but this married couple can. Both guys are big boys. It's not a problem for them. However, I can help by driving their truck slowly down in the pasture between the bales of hay that are lined up on each side of the trailer where they can load the bales on. As they load, I can enjoy the beautiful scenery. I've seen elk, deer, coyotes drinking out of the irrigation ditch that runs all around the pastures on different occasions. On the last leg of them loading the hay onto the trailer, I looked over to the next pasture and started watching the ranchers' horses grazing when I noticed a bare spot in the pasture. It looked like the ground had been scraped. Then this horrific, god-awful smell hit me. The guys noticed it as well. We were all gagging. They hurried up to load the hay onto the trailer. The rancher met us on the way out so we could pay him. We told him about the smell just in case he didn't know about it. He did know about it, and he proceeded to tell us that last week he had found a deer carcass in the horse pasture I had mentioned above. He said it was all shredded up. He's never seen anything like it. He mentioned that the smell was so bad that he threw up on the spot. His dog refused to go near the deer carcass, which he found was rather odd. He left the remains with the backhoe to take it up and drop it off to the back of his property in the heavy woods for the coyotes. He said the minute he picked up the deer carcass with the backhoe, the coyotes started to howl like crazy. He said that creeped him out because he knew they were watching him. When he dropped the deer carcass off at the edge of the woods, he then heard a very deep howl along with the coyotes. He said that it did not sound like a coyote. He said that he got very nervous and got out of there. I wonder what attacked that deer a week ago that could have let such a terrible smell behind, and we could smell it a week later. I almost forgot to mention this part. Remember the scraped bare spot I noticed in the horse pasture? He told us that he scraped out the dirt where the deer carcass was lying to get rid of the smell there. It sounds like a Dogman, but because he didn't see anything, I can't confirm it. That deep howl makes me think that it was. I hope you are doing well. I have not emailed you in a while, and I will send you an email. I hope your Christmas and holidays were wonderful. Today's fifth subscriber, Colorado submission. Hey Jeff, thank you for everything you do. Most of the paranormal stuff I have dealt with is cattle mutilation on ranches in western Colorado around Montrose area where I grew up. My first encounter as I was around 10 years old and was stalked in the Black Canyon area of Colorado. I was hiking down to the river to go fishing with my dad. He took a more advanced trail. I think it was a bobcat trail, if I remember correctly, and I was taking Chucker Trail. Before I get too far, I'm telling you this encounter because it relates to recent stuff. Anyway, 10 minutes into the hike, I felt this horrible dread. Something was telling me to get back to the truck. I tried to ignore it and kept pushing on. I made it about halfway to the river before I physically could not take the feeling I was having. It was at this point I started seeing very large tracks that I couldn't identify. At the time I assumed them to be mountain lion, but they were very skinny and long with huge claws. They only had 3 front pads though. About halfway to the truck I started seeing them again, but this time they were following my original footprints on the way down. I realized at this point I was in serious trouble and chambered around in my shotgun. When I got to the truck, I quickly unlocked it and jumped in, locking the door behind me. It was at this point I saw it looking at me from the top of a rock. It was solid black, very wide and low to the ground. I thought it was a cat, but it didn't look right. I still don't know what it was, and the very wide, low stance still gives me nightmares. This thing had to have been 300 pounds, but the way it was standing on all fours was so strange. Maybe 1.5 feet off the ground. The face looked between a cat and a canine. In other words, it had a dog's snout, but shorter, if that makes sense. Luckily, it disappeared and nothing further happened. Fast forward to last November, my daughters and I were flying my drone looking for animals, and I was looking for whatever this thing I am about to tell you. I didn't tell my daughters or anyone. I had been seeing what I described as a child running away on all fours a few times, extremely low to the ground. My drone took off above the trees when this thing, whatever it is, jumped out of the brush 10 feet away from us and ran like the wind. It was incredibly fast. I only saw the backside of it, and it just looked like a solid black mass in a strange low-to-the-ground running stance. It was incredibly strange. It was very large, black as night, and ran faster than I had seen anything move. It was like it was pulling itself with its front legs and pushing with its back legs together, not separate like a dog or a cat runs. Since then, I started to fly my drone looking for it, and it has seemed to have been gone till a few weeks ago. I started to smell a very strong odor of pus and wet dog on my front porch and shop area. I've caught it running in the sides of my eye, if that makes sense, 2 times, but the thing is so fast it's hard to keep up before it disappears. This started happening right after the kids and I went back out into the woods and had a fire and talked for hours one afternoon. Not sure that has anything to do with it or not. I haven't seen it long enough to catch any features on the face, but it was definitely triangular shaped. I'm sorry, this isn't very exciting, but that's really all I have. Oh, we have also woken up twice at around 3 in the morning to growling outside, but it stops as soon as I get up and turn the lights on. Today's final Colorado subscriber Dogman submission. Hey Jeff, I wanted to start by telling you that I followed your channel for about a year now. Memories of my encounter a little over 16 years ago were stirred up from the ambulance encounter you shared. I was also contacted recently by the government agency and given the all clear to move back home when I'm ready. This will become more clear in telling you my story. Also to note, Robert is not my real name, and this is a junk email, as I still work in government service, and I do not want to be identified. Back in the fall of 2003, I was working as a sheriff's deputy approximately 75 miles west of Denver, Colorado. I was young, new, fresh off field training, almost off probation. It was late afternoon, and I was dispatched to a call about a bear outside of a caller's home. I acknowledged the call and traveled to the location. I was less than 5 minutes out. A minute before arrival, I was called over the radio that the bear is now outside of another house, but this one was 2 miles away. I thought that was odd that the bear had covered so much ground in a short period of time. Backup was 15 minutes or more out, as there were only 4 deputies, including myself, on shift. I rerouted myself to the new call as the person on the phone said it was outside of their home at this time. Upon my arrival, I pulled out my department-issued Remington 870, except this one was a loaner, as it was my supervisor's 14-inch barrel model. I ejected 1 round of buckshot and loaded a Spear 1-ounce high brass slug into the chamber, followed by 2 more into the tube. My last 2 shots would be the standard issue Federal Premium Copper coated double-aught buck. I knocked on the door, and a woman in her mid to late 30s answered. She was shaking and told me that a bear was outside of her rear window to her house. She saw the back of the head and 1 eye looking at her inside the house. She said that when she noticed it, it moved away from the window, growled, and hit and scratched the house. She wanted me to check the area and make sure it was gone, as her 2 kids would be returning home from after-school practice. I had maybe an hour of daylight left. I radioed to backup that I was going to check the area out behind the house for the bear. Backup deputy number 1 was 5 to 7 minutes out. Backup deputy number 2 went to another house for the first call. This was due to the first caller getting more scared and wanting a deputy. Walking my way to the backyard, I looked at the window where the homeowner said she was. When she saw it, the window was almost 6 feet from where I was standing. I thought to myself, that'd be a very big bear. I also noticed scratches in the siding of the home at the bottom of the window. They were pretty deep, and 5 lines running at a 1 o'clock to 7 o'clock. I then made my way to the wood line just past her backyard. I walked straight into the woods and came upon a small creek. The banks of the creek were several feet wide, and the water running through it is approximately 10 feet wide, 6 to 8 inches deep. The bank of the creek raised approximately 3 feet on both sides. Following the creek for about 50 yards into the forest, I saw a large brown furry animal walking away from me on all 4s. At this time, I clicked off my safety. I was walking along the dry bank of the creek, trying to make my way to firmer ground. But the bushes along the high portion of the creek blocked me. Then I moved my way towards the large tree along the bank, as was just past it in the opening higher ground. When I got to the tree, I switched the shotgun to my left hand and used my right to grab onto the tree. The animal heard me, turned toward me, stood up. I then thought to myself that this is no bear. Just then, a huge face of a wolf creature appeared literally a foot away from me, from the brush by the tree. I was screwed. This was like the scene out of Jurassic Park where the raptor surprised the hunter from the side and kills him. I did the only thing I could think of doing and let go. I fell out of the tree to the bank below just to create some space. The creature was too fast and grabbed my right arm and held me in place, its massive hand covering 3/4 of my forearm, and I felt the searing hot pain of one of its claws penetrating my department jacket, digging into the inside of my forearm. The creature looked into my eyes, grinned and growled or laughed, as it was the oddest growl I had ever heard. I used all my strength in me, wrenched the shotgun around to point it at the creature. I pulled the trigger. I don't think the creature saw the shotgun until it was too late. I nailed him right in the upper stomach. I was released and fell to the creek bed. I had an unusually soft landing, or just didn't feel anything at the time. I switched the shotgun to my right hand, racked it, Fired at the only thing I could see, its head. I saw the jawbone fly, then it was quiet. I immediately remembered the other creature up the creek, turned, and saw 3 more standing about 35 yards away. I racked the last slug into the chamber and fired it at them. My round glanced the center creature's rib cage. It let out a yelp. I fired the last 2 rounds of buck. I know the spread hit all of them. They all darted up in the opposite side of the creek from me and out of sight. I unholstered my Glock 21 and fired another 6 rounds at one of the creatures when it returned to the creek bank. It then ran back into the woods. Both other deputies heard the shots and came to my aid. I needed 6 stitches to close the cut on my forearm. Every off-duty deputy was called in to look for the 3 more bear. Nothing was found. The one body on the scene was guarded by a sheriff and his major. The feds showed up from Denver in about an hour. I was asked a lot of questions and asked multiple times if I was bit. I also had my blood drawn 3 times over the next 3 days. I was told checking for rabies, which I know they were not looking for. At the medical center, after getting stitched and cleaned up, Agent Bob, this is what I call him to this day, his thick southern accent came to me and told me that he was impressed that I didn't die from coming upon 4 bear, and the one that I killed was a very large one. He had given me a handwritten card with his number on it, told me to call him if I see any more bear. I asked him if I should stock up on silver, kind of a tongue-in-cheek move on my part, telling him, I know what you're really talking about. To my shock, he told me that it would be not a bad idea, but the slug to the head seemed to work just fine. The sheriff came in and told me he was going to give me a commendation for protecting the public from a crazed bear, and to take the next 6 weeks off with pay to heal from my injury. Jeff, I have more to this story, part 2 of sort. If you want to hear about, let me know, as the other 3 dogmen come back for me at my house during my time off. If not, just let me know. I don't want to bother you. Hey Jeff, I wanted to hear back from you before I wasted my time in writing another book to you. I'm glad you are taking me seriously. Thank you for that, as I have been holding on to this story for a long time. Please feel free to correct any grammatical errors, as I get emotional and shaky whenever I try to share or write this down. I want to follow up on a few things from the first part. The first dogman that grabbed me is described as all black with shades of gray mixed in the coat. The eyes were pure gold in color, with small circular wisps of black. There was no eye shine, as it was still daylight, and it purposely got in my face to show dominance. In fact, it was so close I could see the dark plaque build up on its front teeth and canine. Closest image is the one that you use with the dogman's face in the grass. The first time I saw this image, it gave me instant flashbacks. The way it looked at me and grabbed me, I saw extreme intelligence in its eyes. It was blind luck that I survived. If I did not click off the safety of the shotgun or maintained a firing grip when I transferred it to my left hand, I may not be here today. Before I left for the medical center, I was able to look at the body after my sector partner bandaged up my arm to control the bleeding. There was not much left of the face. The ears were like German shepherds, but with tufts on their peak. The hand almost reached to its knees. The hands were massive, and the claws did not look like they'd grown out like fingertips, but were an extension of the finger. I picked up the hand, and one of the other deputies said, "Should you be doing that? It might be carrying disease." I said, "We already tangled, so I'm probably already done." The hand felt very leathery, and the claws were not really sharp, but with the force they are being driven at, it could cause a lot of damage. This male had what I would call a slight chest puff, like a mini mane that some dogs have. The legs and feet looked like how we would look if we only walked on the balls of our feet, with the heel being more of a joint, unlike a dog. This one had 5 toes, not 4, but it still looked like a larger pawed foot. There was no tail I could see, but the body was lying on its back. I stretched out its left leg and estimated its height to be approximately 8.5 feet tall. I'm not good with weight, but the feds needed 2 Kubotas to drag it out to a waiting 3,500 truck. The second Dogman, a person, was smaller in built than the first, but it was later found to be a female. I believe this one was trying to distract me while the male sprung his trap. She was dark brown in color. The other 2 appeared to be male, both similar looking than the one I killed. Now that the descriptions are out of the way, I will move to the rest of the encounter and where I have been relocated by the feds. I was dropped off that evening at my small home, which is a nice 10 by 50 or 1,050 square foot, all brick, 2-bed, 2-bath home on 3/4 an acre, perfect for a single guy. My nearest neighbor is 600 yards away. My parents helped me purchase it when I got my job. My parents live in Denver. I was greeted by my small female German Shepherd, Lucy. She was happy to see me, but kept smelling me. And she kept tucking her tail. After getting cleaned up and changing, she was all hugs and kisses. The next morning, I checked in with the sheriff's office. When I pulled into the parking lot, I noticed at least 6 federal vehicles and a federal armored vehicle, like today's Bearcat. I went in and met with the sheriff. The sheriff handed me my commendation letter. He told me to read it carefully, as the feds were all over the office. He also told me that our federal friends were staying in town for the next few days to help the department try to locate any more bear. I went out to my car and took out my letter. Inside the note, there was a note that said, "Meet the clerk at the courthouse, name redacted." I traveled there to meet redacted. She handed me another envelope and told me to read it right there. I opened the envelope and I read the handwritten letter from my sheriff. It read as follows: "Son, I can't help you in your time of need, as my hands are tied and I'm being watched. So are you. The agents are using you as bait. You are being followed by them, but I don't think they're here to protect you. Protect yourself however you can. Do not leave and go home to your parents, as the others may come back for you. When we get through this, we can all have a talk on what I know. You have 1 down and 6 more to go." After I was done reading it, I shredded it and flushed it down the toilet. Over the next week, I went to all my doctor appointments, which were held in a mobile command bus by a doctor I had never seen. She was nice, but barely said a word. Agent Bob stopped by and asked if everything was okay at my home. I told him everything was fine. He said, "That's great." And on his way out, he looked back at me and said, "Trust your dog." I always carried my Glock 21 with 3 additional mags, and at home I had loaded my personal Remington 1187P shotgun, similar to the one I carry at work, but this was a semi-automatic and held 7-in-1. I loaded it full of slugs and set it by my bedroom door. Thanks, Pops, for the Police Academy graduation present. On night 11, I woke up at around 2 in the morning to my dog whimpering and growling. I could hear what sounded like multiple footsteps outside my house. I had my blinds closed in my bedroom and didn't want to open them. I went over and picked up the shotgun, rechecked it, clicked the safety off. I opened my bedroom door and my dog ran out to the living room and dining area. She immediately locked on the back window. Tucked her tail and was frozen, but it was like she couldn't decide whether to bark or run. I had a desk set up in the dining area, as this is where my computer was. It had a small desk lamp on it next to the computer. While still in the hallway, which was dark, and around the corner, I used a mirror on the opposite wall to look at the window. I saw the head of a female dogman looking into the window with a side-eye stare, like how a really pissed-off dog would look, warning you that it was going to bite. This time, I could see the golden reflection of its eyes. I whispered the command of speak to my dog. She went crazy, barking. I then heard both my bedroom windows shatter. I popped around the hallway corner, lined up my rifle sights on my shotgun, and pulled the trigger. The window was blown outwards. I then swung the shotgun towards my bedroom, but couldn't find anything to shoot at. I then heard a diesel engine race up and stop. Then I started to hear suppressed gunfire all around my home. After a few moments, Agent Bob knocked on the door. He told me the coast was clear. I saw 6 men dressed in full SWAT gear with suppressed AR-10s. Agent Bob had me walk with him to my backyard, and on the ground was a female. Agent Bob then said, "You bagged us a girl. Thanks, I've been needing one of these, and they're hard to find." There were 2 more bodies in the woods just behind my house, and he said 2 got away. Agent Bob was a little more open to me now. He never said what they were other than bear, but told me that if he could, he'd eradicate them all. But people want to research, and air support would draw in much attention. He told me that I couldn't stay here because I'm a marked man now. It took a few days, but my house was purchased by them. I was moved to a desert city. They put in a good word for me at the new department. I was quickly hired and started my new job. I am now of high rank, like brass on the collar. So, I don't want to come out as crazy. Agent Bob gave me some specific instructions to visit my parents. One is always to fly to Denver, never drive, never go back to the county I worked at or surrounding counties. Once a year, they would ask me for some old, worn, unlaundered clothes. Agent Bob retired in 2015. He told me in one of my yearly checks, I don't know what happened in July of 19, but I was contacted and told that any bears that might remember me have been taken care of, and all requested travel restrictions have been lifted. I will no longer be contacted by them. That is it, Jeff. You know everything now. Cover up? Yup. For the common good? I believe so. Can they be killed? Easy. But only if you have luck and speed on your side and an awesome dog. R.I.P. Loyal Lucy. Finally, I feel that since everything is over now, if I tell my story, the feds are not going to care, as I'll sound crazy. The others in my group feel the same, as none of us ever signed a non-disclosure. I think the feds know if we come out with our stories, we'll just lose our jobs and look like kooks. So I asked him if he wanted to come on, and I said, hey, I'd like to have you share your experiences with me on the channel, the way people can hear you. Please let me know. Hey Jeff, I'm sorry I have not gotten back to you more recently. Also, with the current events, I am working nights and out on the streets. I'm a lieutenant now, and on the promotion list to captain. I plan on retiring in 4 years when I hit my 20th year of law enforcement. I wish I could go on your show, but my voice is pretty recognizable, and I've been on TV a few times. Also, I was contacted by my last handler and told me not to share much more than I already have, as some of what I said can currently affect their operations. I can talk with you about my incident, but cannot divulge anything related to what they are currently doing or have done recently. They are listening to your channel. Agent Bob is kind of like a more serious combo of Jeff Bridges from R.I.P.D. movie and Alton Brown's impersonation of Colonel Sanders. I've always liked him, as I think he bent the rules to ensure my success in surviving the revenge attack of the Dogman. When he said, trust your dog, he was telling me that She would be my early warning system. I have always had a dog since Lucy. I always wanted to add that Lucy passed away at the old age of old age in 2012. Whenever I go into a wooded environment, I now carry my Glock 20 in 10mm with some really hot loads. I also carry a 4570 Marlin 1895 short-barreled rifle with 430 grain loads. Since my encounters, the few times I have camped with my family have been in Montana, Utah, and Idaho. I have never run into another cryptid. Also, for insurance for myself, I still have half a jawbone recovered from the scene. I have it geocached in a location only known by myself and 2 other people. Bam! Alright folks, I hope you enjoyed tonight's second half. We are that much closer to tonight's live stream, which we will be doing at 12 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Looking forward to it. I am trying to feel better. Headache is a little better. Temp is still about the same, but I will be pushing through. So guys, your support is what makes me push through and is what makes this channel special. Thank you so much. Please stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on your children, your pets, your loved ones, your friends. These creatures are real. We know they're out there. Give them the information we have. God bless you all.